I'm Carol Roth for Goldline. Today I'm discussing how just because it hasn't arrived yet doesn't mean the recession will be a no-show at the party either. The following content does not constitute financial investment or tax advice. It is being provided for informational purposes only. You should consider any investment based on your own financial position, risk tolerance, and other factors. Please consult your own advisors before making any decision to invest. The Fed keeps hiking interest rates. While failing to combat high inflation, the Fed's actions also haven't yet brought us to the brink of recession as many had expected. Why do so many have it wrong? And does this mean that we're going to be able to avoid a recession? Or is the recession perhaps just being fashionably late to the party? Well, think of it as more of a festival than a party. As I have mentioned in previous commentary, with the unusual economic scenario we face as a result of central planning decisions, there aren't a lot of benchmarks to consider. The Fed bringing the proverbial punch bowl to the party, that is, nearly a decade and a half of suppressed interest rates, was unprecedented, as was turning off a third of the economy in 2020, not to mention the excessive money printing that juiced up the Fed's balance sheet to around $9 trillion. You have to consider this historic economic situation in context. Now, the Fed's been using its policy tools to try to bring down inflation, but its tools are demand-side oriented and don't address the major undersupply issues that we're seeing economy-wide. The Fed can't print oil, labor, or housing like they do with dollars, so these undersupply issues remain systemic, and they will be here for the long haul unless they're addressed. More on that in a bit. Now, the Fed, who started the easy money and warped economic party, are now trying to turn off the lights and force people to go home. But consumers, businesses, and the government are still dancing as the music plays on. This party continues because the Fed has to overcome a number of barriers in terms of truly quashing demand. Given their role in erecting these barriers, you'd think they would understand this better. The Fed artificially suppressed interest rates with their easy money policy for around 15 years, with more than half of those years having their target interest rate at or near zero. Debt was cheap and plentiful. Businesses with debt financing needs took full advantage of this easy money environment. Consumers also took advantage of it, locking in low-cost interest rates where they could. And after nearly a decade and a half, basically every entity that needed or wanted debt had access to lots of it at deeply discounted prices. With debt needs locked down, the Fed's raising of interest rates, which in a normal environment would create meaningful blowback from increasing cost of capital, doesn't have the same impact. Today, the Fed's rate hikes will take longer to cycle through the economy. Also, the undersupply in the labor market has been like a coating of Teflon over consumer demand. As long as people have jobs and they believe they can find a new one if needed, they're not going to pull back materially on their spending. This is true even when it means taking on extra debt. And layered on top of all of this is the cost of living adjustments that took place for 2023 to help Social Security recipients keep up with inflation. That 8.7% bump is the equivalent of a consumer stimulus program for around 70 million Americans, which will keep money flowing through the economy. And the Fed's not getting any help from the government either. The government is still spending like drunken sailors, with absolutely no disrespect meant to drunken sailors. The Fed and the government should be pulling in the same direction, but the government has gone financially rogue once again. The strongest Fed policy would be saying, look, we don't have the tools to fix this inflation. We need the U.S. government to pull its weight and do its part. We need them to reduce their deficit spending. We need them to stop creating barriers to supply in energy, labor, housing, and other areas. We're out! But the Fed doesn't have the backbone to do that, and the government isn't going to stop their runaway fiscal train until it completely derails. Now, this doesn't mean that the Fed gets its soft landing and gets to avoid another recession. The recession may just be fashionably late to the party unless something foundationally changes. The plentiful debt will eventually run out and more will be needed, and there will be a bigger impact on working capital. Productivity lags in the labor market will force businesses to make tough choices. Consumers will run out of savings and debt, and cost of living adjustments will be priced into baseline spending. The wealth gap will again be exacerbated, with those in the working and middle class taking a hit to their net worth and not being well positioned to take advantage of the next upcycle. Make sure you keep your financials tight for the short and the long term, as we never know exactly what catalyst may change the macroeconomic environment. Now, if you haven't had an opportunity to hedge your own portfolio, or maybe you haven't hedged enough, consider giving my friends at Goldline a call to help you. They are the only place from which I personally get my precious metals. And do not wait on this. Hedges should be continually evaluated and adjusted on an ongoing basis, dependent, of course, on your current portfolio, your risk tolerance, your objectives, and the changing economic backdrop. Now, in fact, if you call Goldline at 800-319-9533 or visit goldline.com, they have a special offer for their Betsy Ross Freedom Round. Ta-da! Designed by yours truly and exclusively available through Goldline. With a qualified purchase, you get 1 copper Betsy Ross Freedom Round for free with every silver one that you purchase. That's 800-319-9533 or goldline.com. The economic environment at home and abroad has been historic, and the outcomes don't have great benchmarks and parallels to draw from. Be prepared for all outcomes and know that just because the party continues today, it doesn't mean it will continue tomorrow. I'm Carol Roth for Goldline. I'll see you next time. The views and opinions expressed in this video are those of Carol Roth and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Goldline or its parent company or affiliates. These views and opinions may have been previously disseminated in other media.